Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. And this is a little bit different episode this week. We are recording on Monday because of tomorrow being Christmas Eve, obviously. So, happy holidays to everybody. First of all, Joe, you're back home, aren't you? Somewhere in Boston celebrating?
Yeah. Yep. Back with my family. I went home the other day, so excited for the holiday. Obviously, Roger Goodell's got to take over Christmas, so we'll be watching a Steelers game on Christmas Day.
Right. Yeah. I guess. Are there any traditions that you guys do with your family that Roger is ruining this year?
We host every single year, and it's usually just like a nice, chill, nice, like just relaxing day. And obviously, that's going to change this year because the NFL can't keep their hands off the 350 million per game from Netflix, and God forbid the NBA has one day to themselves.
Yeah, and the Netflix almost got the short end of the stick there because last night the Bills very nearly lost to the Patriots, and had that happened, the Chiefs almost certainly would have rested uh, Mahomes. Chris Jones, they probably wouldn't have rushed him back from his injury. Travis Kelce, I mean, we're talking the Chiefs would have been in rest starters mode had they locked up the number one seed. Very fortunately for Netflix's sake, that did not happen. So the Steelers, unfortunately for their sake, will be facing all available Chiefs. Today we're going to be talking about, first of all, recapping the Steelers' loss to the Ravens and the disappointment there. Talking about the injuries that have piled up, and they continue to pile up on this 3-game and 11-day gauntlet. And then we'll talk about previewing the Chiefs a little bit. Joe, where do you want to start with the Ravens?
Yeah, I think we can kind of start from what I think the turning point when you had as the turning point in the game was the Russell Wilson fumble inside the Ravens 5 yard line. The Steelers had kind of all the momentum right there. They scored, they got to stop. The offense looked really good. Wilson takes off, big gain, and then he just doesn't slide. He tries to play a little bit of hero ball, puts the game on him, and tries to score a touchdown. And I mean, Russell Wilson 10 years ago maybe makes a cut, makes that play, or I don't know, finds a way to evade the defender. Russell Wilson now, not as spry, gets popped, fumbles, Ravens take over. The game's never the same from that point on. Um, so really, even though the Steelers got popped, like the Steelers got lost by 17 points, kind of it was an ugly end of the game. I think the game was probably a little bit closer than the score indicated because if Wilson doesn't fumble that ball, if he just slides, even if the Steelers only get 3 points there, they take a lead. Um, so that was to me was really just after that point of watching the game was just such a hopeless feeling because you just I just kind of figured they're just gonna they were gonna lose at that point. Like then the Ravens go 96 yards for a touchdown drive and takes what 6 plays, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just wasn't fun watching the game after that point because he just knew the Ravens were going to find a way to win because usually when Steelers Ravens those plays go the Steelers way they find a way to make a play and get the turnovers and then I mean they had the Ravens fumbled 2 times early, Steelers couldn't pounce on it, and so when there's the Ravens making those plays then it's like all right they're gonna win this game, and sure enough that's what happened. I mean there's a lot of other reasons why they lost. The run defense was abysmal, but that turnover really kind of sunk the game.
Yeah, the Ravens put 3 balls on the ground in total. They put one on the ground at the end of the game, which wasn't as impactful really because the game was kind of already out of reach. But they put 3 balls on the ground. Steelers didn't recover any of them. Steelers put one on the ground. The Ravens recovered, and that was the difference. In that offensive drive before Russell Wilson fumbled, the Ravens actually shanked that punt horribly. So the Steelers had everything going for them, all the momentum. I mean, it was like the Steelers had a chance to go up by a score and then start to protect the lead, and then that changes the dynamic of the game. Instead, they find themselves in the exact opposite situation, trailing by a touchdown, and yeah, that was absolutely the turning point. Although the Steelers did even the score back up later in the game. Of course, Russell Wilson then made probably the second biggest turning point, which was the pick six to Marlon Humphrey. Which of those 2 turnovers do you feel had? I mean, I guess you just said that the fumble was the biggest turning point, but do you blame Wilson more for that, or do you think the pick six was a worse play?
The pick six was a bad throw. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, I don't really love going to the Ravens had defended the play action boot really well. Steelers kept going to it, even though the Ravens had defended it really well in both matchups. So I don't really understand why they would keep going to it. But if Wilson puts that ball more toward the sideline, Pruitt at least has a chance on it. He just threw it inside, and Humphrey made an easy play. But yeah, I mean, at that point, you're trying to drive to tie the game. There's still going to be time on the clock for Baltimore to go down and do something. So I think given, Steelers could have taken a 14-7 lead and really like been charged up and had the momentum on their favor had that first fumble not happened. So I think that's probably why that one was more impactful. But it did, I mean, the interception did basically end the game because you still like, I guess, a little sliver of hope that they'll go down and tie it and who knows what can happen from there. But after that, obviously they're down 2 scores and the game's over. So yeah, they both were really bad, but I just think the first one was a little worse, especially just because of how avoidable it was. Like all you have to do is slide. Like your 36-year-old quarterback, like haven't quite found the fountain of youth yet. Like you just go down and don't try to make a play that you can't make anymore. And that's why it was just frustrating. But yeah, both of them were bad, but I mean, Russell Wilson, he's played worse games before. He'll move on. I'm not really too concerned about him because other than that, I mean, he played a pretty good game. For most of the game, he had the Steelers in it without George Pickens. I think a lot of Russell Wilson's, this is who you thought he would be is a little overblown given that outside of those two plays, it was pretty solid football. So,
Yeah, he completed 2/3 of his passes, 22 for 33, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns to an interception. Um, he spread the ball around once again, which he had been struggling to do without Pickens. A bunch of guys got multiple catches. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys had more than one reception. The fumble, he talked about it. He's like, yeah, I'll need to watch the tape back to see if I could have, maybe gone further to the right or maybe cut a little harder back inside. I think the thing that I mean, obviously in hindsight, the thing he chose to do was the worst possible option. But looking at the tape, it literally was like he could have, if he went further out to the right towards the sideline, maybe he doesn't make it to the end zone, but he doesn't take such a hard hit and he probably doesn't fumble at that point. If he maybe cuts it back a little earlier, maybe he does kind of get past Ardarius Washington there. But yeah, the way that he did it, he got himself crushed. I mean, I was a little worried he was going to be hurt, and then Justin Fields is out. So then what? You're talking about Kyle Allen getting in, and that would have been a disaster at this point in the season. So yeah, not great there from Russ. The Steelers allowed a 162-yard rusher, Derrick Henry, the number one, the most that anyone's ever rushed against the Steelers in this rivalry. I think the previous was, I think it was like 150, and it happened twice, once from Justin Forsett and once from Latavius Murray, I think. Kind of some random names in there. Yeah. Derrick Henry setting a 162-yard record here against the Steelers. How concerning is this rushing defense? Or really, how concerning is this defense in general? Do you think, the defense has really slid in the standings lately in terms of points, and I think they're 6th in terms of yards total defense. I think they're 11th now. They're outside the top 10 now. How concerned are you with the defense?
I'm moderately concerned, but I think a lot of it has been because of injuries. I mean, I think Deshaun Elliott's the best tackler on their defense. They haven't had him. I mean, Derrick Henry, he's a great running back. The Steelers also, their run fits were really, really poor against them. I think with Deshaun Elliott, a lot of those gains that we saw go for 11 or 12 yards, maybe go for 4 or 5, which still isn't good, but it's not as, explosive. Henry keeps going like that. So without him, without Larry Ogunjobi, and then they lost Joey Porter Jr. in game, and didn't have Dante Jackson, so it was Corey Trice getting his first snap since week 3 and James Pierre on the outside. So really just not ideal with just banged up. So I am a little bit concerned just because, you go back and you watch and their run fits were really poor. Derrick Henry was, they had plenty of opportunities where somebody could have shot a gap and brought him down for, a gain. But yeah, so I am a little bit concerned, but I don't think it's as big of a deal just because if they get some guys back healthy, things will be a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little concerned. I mean, the defense isn't. I wouldn't say we're going to look back on this season and say, oh wow, this is one of the great Steelers defenses. Which at the beginning of the year it looked like there was a chance for that. So I would say in some ways it's been a disappointment. Some of that has to do with the injuries, obviously, especially lately, which we'll talk about in a bit. The injuries just continue to stack up, and a bunch of guys have been missing time. Obviously, Alex Highsmith missed significant time, multiple points throughout the season, and so all of these things add up and take a toll on the defense overall. And then, of course, playing 77 snaps against the Eagles, followed up by 62 against the Ravens on defense. They played I think it was 72 minutes of defense in 2 games, so well over a typical 2-game share of what they should be working. So some of that's also to do with George Pickens being out. It's the complementary football's kind of gone out the window. It was a little bit more back this week, but overall, it's just the defense has not been set up to succeed lately. And they, with what they've been given to work with, they still haven't done a very good job with it overall. So Calvin Austin III stepping up a little bit. He had 4 receptions for 65 yards. He was the top receiver. He's kind of been the top receiver since George Pickens has been out. And I think, what was it, Mike Tomlin said, his ascension has nothing to do necessarily with the injuries in the wide receiver room. It's just kind of just what you'd expect from a guy at this point in his career. Do you think that because this is his 3rd season, so this would be the time to extend him if they were going to. Do you think he's an extension candidate this offseason?
I think if they can do a cheap 2 to 3 year deal, like, why not? I think he offers a lot of upside as a punt returner. He had the punt return touchdown earlier this season. He's been solid this year, besides the fact that he gets absolutely thumped every time. He takes a hit after a punt, which I always cringe a little bit, thinking that he's not going to get up after the play. And now he's coming on a little bit as a receiver. Even early in the season, he had the big game against the Chargers, and now he's just kind of stringing it together with more consistency. So if they can do something that, decently affordable for player and something that he likes, player and team, I don't really want to throw out an estimate right now, because I don't really know what that could look like, because who knows, what these next 2 games in the playoffs will look like. But something, a little bit affordable, and it also gives you insurance if you at least have somebody else there. So I could see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it at all. I think the underrated aspect of him is the leadership. Roman Wilson pointed to him as the leader of the wide receiver room in the offseason, and that's including a room that has guys like, Van Jefferson and some of these veteran guys, Scotty Miller, some of these guys who have been around in the league a little longer and have more experience. Calvin Austin III, a guy who really doesn't have much experience in the NFL, or didn't coming into the season, was kind of being viewed as the leader. And so I think that's another aspect. I think he's really bought into the whole program here. And so I would not mind giving him an extension at all. Jaylen Warren ended up with more snaps than Najee Harris by quite a bit, actually. Let's see. Najee had 17 and Jaylen Warren had 40. And that was reflected in the box score a little bit. Their rushing totals were actually pretty similar, but Jaylen Warren had a lot more receiving. He had 5 receptions for 44 yards, 12 carries for 48 yards. He almost got over the 100 mark overall. Do you think this is a sign of things to come? Do you think this is just kind of them managing the load during this 3-game stretch? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I think some of it is just, some of it is managing load. That's what Mike Tomlin said in his press conference. But a lot of it too, I think the Steelers got behind earlier. They had to throw the football more. Warren's a better pass blocker. He's a better receiver than Najee Harris is. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. I think the snaps will kind of even out a little bit more on Wednesday. And it's good to have Harris fresh down the stretch. We've seen him be dynamic this season. He's broken off a couple 20-plus yard runs. He's had some nice games for the Steelers, so hopefully keeping him fresh late in the season will help him be more effective and more dynamic come the postseason, where they're really going to need him. So I do think Warren will continue to, maybe be more of a 50-50 split, maybe 55-45. I don't think it's going to be anything more, like the 40-17 that we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, and Mike Tomlin also mentioned that he's not really the one micromanaging their carries, and it kind of had to do a little bit with the flow of the game and how the game was panning out. It sounds like Eddie Faulkner might be the one that's kind of managing that on a snap-to-snap basis. And so if you want to ask anybody, it sounds like maybe ask Faulkner what's going on there between the division of labor, although I'm sure Tomlin has some say in what's going on there, but I'm sure Tomlin did not go into this game anticipating Najee to get so few snaps. Last year, they really leaned on him over the final stretch of the season when the Steelers went on that 3-game winning streak. So, maybe this week we see a little bit more Najee. Maybe he's a little rested now. Maybe they unleash him again. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's a trend necessarily of things to come. I think that's it for the Ravens game, unless there's anything else you want to talk about. All right, well, then we'll just hop into injuries and the injury report if you want to take that away.
Yeah, so somewhat lengthy injury report, but a lot of it is due to rest for the Steelers. Justin Fields, who was inactive against the Ravens. So yesterday's report was estimated, so nothing really official yet. Today will kind of be the big day, but Justin Fields was estimated DNP. Ben Skoranek DNP with a hip. Joey Porter Jr. DNP with a knee. Tyler Matakevich with a knee. Mike Williams, Landon Roberts, Isaac Seumalo, TJ Watt, and Cameron Hayward all would have gotten rest days had the Steelers actually hit the field. And then George Pickens, Deshaun Elliott, Dante Jackson, and Larry Ogunjobi all listed as limited. Tomlin said yesterday that doors open for those guys to play. It seems a little more probable this week than last week that they actually will play. So hopefully for the Steelers, they get Pickens back, and getting Elliott back would be huge. And then with Porter, his status up in the air with the knee, then Dante Jackson becomes that much more important. And then Ogunjobi, he's been a decent part of the defensive line this year. It'll be good to have him back and add more depth to that position room. So hopefully those four can get back this week, and we'll see about Fields, Skoranek, Porter, and Matakevich, because those are the four that were DNP yesterday that did not practice, or were estimated not to have practiced.
Yeah, even with the estimated report, the thing that stuck out to me was the fact that they listed Justin Fields as DNP and Pickens as limited. That tells me that they expect, at least a decent shot, as Mike Tomlin said, so it's not a huge surprise, but it was, they could have easily listed Fields as limited as well, given that they didn't actually really practice, or they could have listed both as did not practice. So just the fact that there was a difference between the two of them gives a little hope for Pickens there, I think. We will see. I'm kind of at a 50-50 toss-up right now. I'm not really leaning one way or the other whether or not he will play. I think some of the local guys have kind of said more week 18. Some of the national guys have said more, there's optimism for this week. And so we'll see who's reporting, who has the better source, I guess. I'm sure the team doesn't even really know right now, because it depends on how his hamstring responds. And there's not a ton of time to really test that out. And so the other thing was the special teams injuries. Matakevich was not something that was known until just yesterday, and so having Skoranek and Matakevich out, potentially out, would be a blow to the special teams. And the special teams has been one of the things that has been able to spark the Steelers towards at least 2 or 3 of their wins this year. So that is no small thing, especially for the Steelers. Special teams, big deal. So. Yeah, the secondary is very, very concerning to me. Dante Jackson, even if he returns this week, which is no guarantee, he seems to get hurt basically every game. I think he's dealing with several small injuries, potentially bigger than small injuries, fighting through those. And so even if he comes back, and if Joey Porter Jr. is out, that's really not a great situation to be in. You're talking about probably Trice and Pierre being your starting corners for the most important stretch of the season. And, who knows what's going on with Porter. It sounded kind of weird. At first it was a calf, and then it was a knee that's affecting his calf. That sounds not great to me, but I'm obviously not a doctor, but that I don't know what's going on there. And we don't have any clarity on that yet, because Tomlin didn't have any more information on that. So hopefully we get some more information soon, but man, that is a big, big, big concern right now entering the final stretch. Moving on to the Chiefs. Mike Tomlin downplayed a little bit the notion that the Chiefs are not that great of a 14-1 team. Some people think because they've been in so many tight games, because they found so many unique ways to win, that, maybe their 14-1 isn't that impressive. Mike Tomlin said they're 14-1. They are the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions. He's like, how dominant do they actually need to be? Basically downplaying the notion that they are somehow underperforming. And so I think he's kind of got them in the appropriate set of mind that this is not going to be an easy game. A lot of people probably view the Eagles game and maybe that Ravens game as more difficult than the Chiefs, but I think, Tomlin is appropriately viewing this as maybe their biggest challenge yet against Mahomes and company. Where do you want to start here, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think excuse me. Well, you have to know about the Chiefs. They only have one loss. I mean, yeah, they've won a lot of close games. Oh, they beat the Broncos on the last second kick block. The Ravens, or not the Ravens, the Raiders botched things at the end of the game. Even the Ravens, Isaiah likely had half a toe out of bounds. Um, so like, yeah, oh, they've like gotten bailed up, but they've only have one loss. So they find a way to win games. Just like the Steelers have been super good in one score games. That at this point, it's not really a fluke. The Chiefs are just, it's not a fluke. They just find a way to win down the stretch. So, um, yeah, I think it'll definitely be a challenge, and it's a game they're going to need. The Steelers are going to need Pickens back for, but we'll see with the Chiefs because they might be banged up. Chris Jones went down. I think it was a groin injury or
His
hamstring, something,
calf.
calf injury. So those soft tissues. So he went down with a calf against the Texans on Saturday. Or I don't. I was there. I think the report yesterday was an actual report. There's no thing that was estimated. So he was DNP yesterday. So we'll see what his status for Wednesday with a quick turnaround. That would obviously be a huge loss for the Chiefs. He's their best defensive player. And as we talked about to lead off the show, the Bills were able to hold off the Patriots last night, which game was much closer than I think Buffalo fans would have liked, but they held them off, so they're still in contention for the number one seed. So the Chiefs are going to be playing, full suite of guys, and so it's gonna be a test. Tomlin appropriately, as you said, has seems to have them ready to go. Isn't gonna, downplay the challenge ahead of them. And with the Steelers now tied atop the AFC North, they have a slight advantage, but same record as the Ravens. It's a game that's going to be super important, and they have to come out and play like their playoff lives or their at least their home field lives depend on it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I think to add more context to their close game thing, I think they've had 10 one-score games this year, and of those 10, 5 of them have been field goal games. So they have been in just a crazy number of very, very close games. And yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about getting out of stadiums. Mike Tomlin said, this is a parity league. If you can find ways to get out of stadiums with consistency, that means you're a good team, and they certainly have done that. And so this will not be any kind of cakewalk. Not that I think anyone was really expecting a cakewalk, but this is probably the biggest challenge the Steelers have faced, and they will need to be able to prove that they can beat the Chiefs at home, because if they want to get a big playoff run in, they are going to have to play the Chiefs in Arrowhead at some point. I almost guarantee that. So, big test for the Steelers and their playoff viability this week. I'm kind of leaning with Chris Jones that he's probably not going to play. I think the reporting was a grade 1 calf strain yesterday. A little update on that. So I think he certainly could play. If this was a playoff game, he would. But they don't want to risk that getting any worse. That's similar to Pickens with his hamstring. Although Pickens is a grade 2, it's kind of one of those things where maybe sit out a week because we're going to need you for the playoffs. We're going to need you for the stretch. They're probably going to take a similar approach with Chris Jones, but we will see on that. What else was there? There was Xavier Worthy, I think, was dinged up in that game, but he was able to return. Sometimes those injuries can kind of maybe swell after the game and stuff can flare up. Did he end up getting included on yesterday's practice report? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, but he was a full participant.
Okay, so he'll be good to go. No concerns there. Something to monitor. Deontay Johnson is on the waiver wire today. That stuff will be processing probably, maybe already will have processed by the time a lot of you have listened to this. If the Chiefs are one of the reported teams that have interest, maybe Deontay Johnson could be a late addition to this matchup. Not that I think he would really play if that happens, but something to watch. And I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but some people are wondering if the Steelers are going to put in a claim. I'm still leaning no. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would lean no. I just think it's tough when you trade a guy for, I think the reporting this offseason was that he had to grow up with locker room issues. There's a report they got into the fight with Minka. He got into the fight with, Mitch Trubisky years ago against the Jets. So if you're trading a guy purely because of, locker room issues to go bring him back on a contending team late in the season seems a little bit counterintuitive. You can kind of look at it from the flip side as, if right now he's kind of burned every single bridge possible, and as an impending free agent, you know, you go and you burn another bridge. What team's going to want you this offseason if he comes to Pittsburgh and acts up again? And so you think maybe you're going to get a good Samaritan who puts his head down and can be productive on the field for a team that really does need another receiver. but I just don't really think it, makes sense to kind of mess up the flow of the locker room. I mean, even with the back-to-back losses, the Steelers locker room has been, a really tight knit unit all season from the sounds of it, a group that really gets along. And I think you kind of threw a wrench in that if you bring in a guy that, got into a fight with a defensive leader in Fitzpatrick last season and maybe wasn't the most like just because of some of his antics last year. So um I would kind of lean against it if it were me, and would think that they'd have, the sense to not add him to the locker room at this point in the season. But I mean, stranger things have happened, so it'll be very interesting to see where he ends up later today.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it would be one thing if the offense was similar, or if there was the same receivers coach, or if there was the same, there's a different wide receivers coach, there's a different offensive coordinator, there's a different quarterback, there's a different quarterbacks coach, kind of passing game coordinator type thing. There's a different what else is different? The whole wide receiver room's basically different, other than Pickens and Calvin Austin. And so he'd be re-entering a very unfamiliar situation, even though it seems like it would be familiar. It really wouldn't be. The Steelers have been extremely slow to integrate guys into their offense. Look at Mike Williams. They take their time. They don't rush these things. They don't just assume that these guys are going to be ready. And it's a whole different offensive system. I just don't think it's the risk reward is really there for the Steelers, given that I doubt they'd even play him that much. The risk of kind of creating a locker room issue based or compared to what they might gain, I just don't think the risk reward is there. But I'm open to being proved wrong, and I know some people are kind of quietly rooting for Deontay to make a reunion in Pittsburgh. We will see. Certainly would be interesting. I think that's it for our topics today. Unless, do you want to let's give some quick score predictions for this Chiefs. I haven't given it a big thought, so kind of putting us both on the spot here, I'm sure. But
On the spot, I will go Kansas City 24-20.
yeah, 24. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to choose the Chiefs as well, unfortunately. And I think I've been wrong the last 2 weeks. So, I'm open to being wrong once again here. And I'll probably do a similar score, maybe 21 to 17 for the Chiefs. Their defense is good. This offense has been not so great without Pickens. I'm not so sure if Pickens will play, and so I think unfortunately we're facing another 3-game losing streak in December. Last year that had the sky falling on Pittsburgh. I don't think this year that it'll be quite as noisy. One, because they've already locked up their playoff spot. And they have, a better record than they did at that point last year. And two, just because there seems to be a lot better leadership in general. Last year, the big talking point was the Steelers' way is gone. There's no leadership on offense this year. They've got Russell Wilson. The offensive leadership, including from Arthur Smith, is way more stable. And so, yeah, it would suck, and it would not be a great look. A lot of people are going to assume that this team will be one and done in the playoffs if they lose this week, if they don't already. But I think that they're built better to withstand that kind of negativity this year. Moving on to our question, and if you guys have a question, please do give us a call at 412-254-3145. You can call or text that line. It's at the bottom of the screen there, or it's in the show notes if you missed me saying the number there. This one is from our friend Brett.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, Texas. My question is, right now you have, likely as not, Dan Moore leaving in the offseason. The replacement plan, as stated before the season, was for Fautano to move to right tackle and Jones to move to left. Would you still advocate for that, or do you believe, as I do, that starting two tackles who didn't take a snap at that position the year before does not make any sense? In other words, should they just simply put Fautano at his natural position of left tackle and leave Dan Moore at right tackle where he's played the last 2 seasons? Thank you very much. Look forward to the answer.
All right, Brett, thank you for calling. As always, we appreciate you. The question being, with Moore likely to move on in free agency, is Broderick Jones going to be the left tackle and Fautanu the right tackle, meaning will the Steelers have basically new tackles at both spots, in the sense that neither will really have that much experience at either spot, Fautanu not having any experience really in the NFL, and Jones basically having, 1 game of experience at left tackle in the NFL from last year. So 2 new spots, or will the Steelers consider having Fautanu over at left, where he played in college, keep Broderick on the right, where he has now played more than, if you combine his 2 years of NFL experience at right tackle, he has more total time at right tackle than he does at left tackle, including college. And so any thought of Jones being a more experienced left tackle and that's his natural position, well, he's now played more right tackle, so I don't know how true that is. Joe, where do you weigh in on this?
I mean, I think it's something they could consider for sure. And I think it's something we'll get more clarity on this offseason when we hear from Omar Khan. But given that they worked Fautanu as a rookie at right tackle now, and now he's rehabbing, and who knows how far along he is in his rehab. We don't really know any of that yet, but it might be tough then to be like, all right, now you're a left tackle. You spent, your entire first training camp cross training and learning how to play right tackle. Well, now we're going to flip you back. So I don't necessarily know if it would be, a new position. Fautanu, if right tackle would be a new position, given that's kind of where he's played. He played, in training camp and very briefly in the preseason in week in practice before, and we came in week 2 against Denver. But it is something they could consider because it does kind of make a little bit of sense now, given that Broderick's played so much right tackle and Fautanu just hasn't played a lot in the NFL because he got hurt. So it'll be interesting to see. And also, I mean, maybe wouldn't be surprised if they brought in some veteran competition, maybe for Jones, maybe somebody that can kind of step in and play left tackle if they need him to, like a high end, third offensive tackle, worst case scenario. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason at the offensive line position there.
Yeah, unless they believe in someone like Spencer Anderson or Dylan Cook or something like that out of tackle, I think that they definitely are going to need to bring in some kind of veteran, like you just said. I'm kind of leaning towards them playing their quote-unquote natural positions of, well, I don't even really know what that means. But Broderick Jones being on the left and Fautanu being on the right, I'm kind of leaning that way just because, Omar Khan saying eventually he will be the left tackle. And I think there's an outside chance maybe that Fautanu could maybe get looks at guard, depending on, there's a lot of routes they could take. I know the Steelers view him as a tackle. And so for now, I'm going to say, as you suggested, Brett, this is likely going to be left Broderick, right Fautanu. Hope that answered your question. That's it for today's show. Happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season. I hope the Steelers can deliver us a win instead of a 3-game losing streak on Christmas. That would not be great, but we will see. That is all for today, and we will catch you guys next time.